is Susan Snyder and I'm in Bloomington, Indiana. This is my studio, which is the Pottery House studio, where I give classes and hold workshops and also do a little bit of my own work. I was mainly a studio potter for 20 years. I was lucky enough to train in Faenza, Italy, which is in north central Italy, east of Florence, south of Bologna. And while I was there, I learned how to do Majolica using traditional Italian techniques. I went to a school for 1,100 hours that was just in ceramic training. And so over here, I have some samples of my work. This is a geometric design. It's very detailed. This is a little bit looser. This is a plate which combines some different designs, the peacock feather with the leopard in the middle. This is my more recent work where I'm kind of playing with borders and taking my work outside of the boundaries, if that makes sense. I've also been doing some pieces that are off-centered. And just for fun, I brought a simple bowl that I did sgraffito on, because I also love that technique. And the techniques that I'm going to show you today for Majolica really can be used for anything that you like. You can use it for carving. You can take one aspect of it, like the way I divide up a pot, and apply it to stoneware, transferring designs. So I hope that these techniques will help you. So yesterday I did a couple of practice rounds and there were quite a few technical glitches. I don't know if it's the weather or everyone is online now. So to avoid that happening during my presentation, I decided to film it, but I will be online answering questions as you watch the video. So send them to me, and then if it's feasible, I will live stream if you want to see anything that's here, and I can show it to you that way. So thank you for understanding. Tone 04. I have some pieces here that are ready to be glazed. One of the first things that I do is I clean the piece with a damp sponge. You don't want it to be too wet. You just want to make sure that any dust that is on there is taken off. And then applying the glaze, there are a couple of different ways to go about it. What I've been doing most recently is that I've been brushing the glaze on. Now for years I used to make my own glaze from scratch and use that, but I had issues with pieces with the glaze coming off or pinholing. And even though it is more expensive to use a commercial glaze, I found that in the long run, I saved a lot of money by purchasing the glaze and using that. When you think about the inventory that you might lose, I think it's worth that investment. So it takes a little bit longer, but I brush on the glaze. I use Amico's LG11, the opaque white. You can also use a matte if you like. And then I take a fan brush, and when I brush it on, I'm going to apply 3 coats. And when you apply the 3 coats, you want to apply it first in one direction, trying to avoid any of these lines. You want it to be even, because if it's not even, then when you go to do the banding lines on top, you're going to have bumps, and if you paint a straight line over a bump, then that line will no longer be straight, because when the glaze melts, it's going to become curvy. So this glaze dries really fast. Just for the purpose of this video, I would then paint it on this way, right? And then maybe do a diagonal. It's not as important, since this is white, and it's going on a white piece, that I do the coverage always in the same direction. I just think that you get better results, but it is important for it to be on thick. If you're using a red earthenware, a terracotta, if you don't get it on thick enough, then it's going to come out kind of pink. That clay body is going to come through. Now you can also dip your piece, and I just want to show you the equipment that I use. I'm not going to go through the process of sieving. You all know how to sieve glaze. If you're using a small jar and there's some issues with the glaze, then you can use a small sieve like this. Have a container that it fits in, and using one of your rib tools, you can pour the glaze in, and then you can just like smooth it through with this to make it go in. If you're doing a lot of pieces, and it's fine to dip your pieces and let them sit and go back. So if you want to dip your pieces, I recommend using a large sieve like this, a fine sieve, and a spatula. Mixing it, if you can see right over here, there's a power drill that has a jiffy mixer on the bottom, so I always mix my glaze with that. When I have it the right consistency, and when I say consistency, I use this tool to measure the viscosity of the glaze. So I dip it into the glaze, and then I let it drip. You want it to take about 20 seconds, counting like this. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, up to 20, and then you know that the glaze is the right thickness. If you do not have one of these tools, one thing that you can do is, if you have broken bisque shards laying around, you can take that, dip it in the glaze, and when it comes out, when you hold it in for about 3 seconds, you want it to be a millimeter thick. So you want it to be about this thick, and then you know that it's the right thickness. If it's on too thick, it's going to crawl. If it's on too thin, the glaze is going to be dry. What do you do if the glaze is too dry after it's been fired? You can brush clear glaze on it and fire it again. If you heat up your pot, either put it on top of a cooling kiln, or if you have an oven nearby, or if it's sunny outside, you can warm your pot, and then the glaze will stick, and you can fire it again. And that works really well. Glazing, as you notice, there's this blue container here. So what I do is, after I've sieved the glaze, I know it's the right consistency, I pour it in here, and when I dip, if I'm dipping a plate, I am going to take my plate and I go in at an angle, hold it in, and then pull it out like this. So I go 1, 2, 3. If I'm glazing something that's flat, like a tile, you want to make sure that there's no like little air bubbles in the glaze too, so you can just blow them and make them settle so that they're not there, because they will appear on your piece. But for a tile, see how I'm holding it with my hand? I'm going to go in at an angle, hold it down, and come back up. And I don't glaze the back side usually. You want to make sure that there's no gap or air pockets, otherwise you'll be missing glaze. Can you brush it on afterwards? Of course, but if you can avoid that, it's better. Then, using a small pocket knife or a sgraffito tool with a blade, you can just scrape off the glaze that's on the edges and make it nice and clean. If you have a spot, or if you see a pinhole, in your glaze, then you want to open it up with your needle tool or your knife, and then dab a little bit of the white glaze. When it's dry, then you're going to just smooth it out so it's nice and even, because you want that surface to always be flat. If you see a pinhole in your piece, and you leave it and you fire it, chances are it's going to be there, because the beauty of the Majolica glaze is that it stays right where you put it. It's not a glaze that moves around. That's why you're able to do the detailed work. So once your glaze has dried, if you have the glaze on the back side, you'll want to make sure you don't put it on the foot. But if it is on the foot, you can either scrape it off with a knife, or if you're doing a lot of glazing, you can use an upholstery sponge like this, get it wet, and then wipe your piece on it, and that will clean the foot of your piece. Now, one thing that I like to use in my work when I'm doing a design and I'm painting it over again are these templates. The templates are made on tracing paper, and what you do is you take the tracing paper and you put it over the picture that you would like to do, or maybe it's a piece that you've already done, it's been fired, you would like to make a template. So you would put the tracing paper on the design, trace over the part that you want. So pretend I traced this, and this is my new template. The next step is I am going to flip it over so that it is upside down. That is key. You want it to be upside down because you're going to create a filter to transfer the design. You can use a needle tool to poke holes. What I like to use is this. This is a big pen. You can see the metal part has been taken off. A needle has been placed in here. And then with a lighter, you melt this part and it holds it in place. And this is a little bit finer than your regular needle tool that you might have in the studio. You can also use a hat pin, but the idea is you're going to take this, put it on top of a sponge, put it on top of bubble wrap, something that is soft, and you're going to poke holes that are very close together going all the way on the design. You're going to poke it all the way in, and then your design is ready to be transferred. And here is a sample of that design transferred on here, ready to be painted. And I'll show another example of that in a moment. But what you need to know is, once you've made that template, in order to transfer the design on, you need a pounce. So this is a piece of cotton cloth. You'll want to use cotton cloth, and then what I fill it with is burnt newspaper. So this is regular newspaper that I've burnt in this container for ashes, and you don't want to use the color section of the newspaper, the glossy. You just want the regular black and white newspaper. I'm going to crumble it over here, try and not make too big of a mess, and put it inside here. You want to get fine ashes. Now this part is a little bit messy, so I'm going to put on my apron so I don't get it all over my clothes. See, I have the burnt newspaper here. Now, if you want to make a pounce and you're putting it on something which is dark, this is not going to work because the ashes that come out are going to be black. But you could try using like talc, a powder, a white, that will just burn off, like cornstarch or talc, I think would work. So see here, I'm tying this tight because I don't want it to come out. And the beauty of these templates is that they last a really long time. I have templates that I made 20 years ago that I'm still using. Just be careful not to get them wet. If you get them wet, the holes shrink up and then you can't use them. All right, so let me show you how to get started. So this is my setup. As you can see, I have a floor length banding wheel. You'll notice that there is a piece of plaster here that you can use a brick, whatever you like, but that allows me to set this at an angle, which makes it easier to paint. Then I've got my banding wheel here. Now underneath this, I can use that to adjust the height. I lift it up, I put it, make it as tall as I want, and then I lock it into place. So if you don't have a banding wheel that is floor length, but it's tabletop, you can adjust it by putting books underneath it or using like a gallon bucket to make it the right height. And when I say the right height, what I mean is that you want to be able to rest your arm so that when you're holding your brush, you're holding it at an angle so that the color can just come right out onto your piece. If you're painting up like this, the color is going to roll back into your brush, and you're not going to be able to do a lot of brush work with that. So you want it to be flowing out of the brush. That's one important step. So here I have a tile, and hopefully you can see what I'm about to do. I'm lining it up because it's square, it's not round. With the banding lines that are on here, if you do a shape over and over again, you can, once you've got it centered, you can even trace on your banding wheel or put tape on where those lines are so you can just set it down and you're ready to go. If I'm painting a plate, the first thing I would do is I would put my name on the back side, and then it took me a while to figure this out, but you want the name to be on the bottom so that when you flip it over, you see it on the other side. So put your name on and then make a line on the other side so you know where that is. Let's just pretend this is a plate. And this is my brush. I'm putting my name on it like this, and then I know that this is the top. So on this side, I'm going to make a line so I can see that that is the top name here. That's the top. Okay. So I'm going to get this centered, and I want my tile to have a frame. So I'm going to take the pencil. Now I could use a ruler, I can measure it that way, but I can also take my finger, set it on the outside like this, and just drag it along, holding the pencil tight. So just going around. You might ask, what kind of pencil am I using? I'm using a Dr. Seuss pencil, One Fish, Two Fish, but like a 3B pencil, a softer lead is ideal. It's going to not carve through the glaze as much. You don't want the tip of your pencil to be too sharp because you'll end up carving through it and taking away the glaze. And that can also affect the way your design's going to work. So that's how I did a tile. Let me show you how I do a spoon rest that's not square. So notice it's not very round. I'm going to take my pencil and just drag it along here. My finger on the outside. It does take a little bit of practice. And I'm going around like this to get a nice line. You get the picture. Okay, so now let's move on to banding line. I got the square. I'm going to hold this with the pencil. My hand is going to go underneath, and I'm going to spin it counterclockwise. I realize that everything that you see is switched around, so just imagine the opposite, because I am right-handed. Okay, so I'm resting my elbow. My left hand is turning the wheel counterclockwise. I'm going to place it in the middle of the square line and spin. And then I'm going to do another circle. I'm going to show you how to do the peacock feather that you saw earlier. I'm going to show you how to do that on here, just to start. So I'm going to make a line. And then in the middle, I'm going to put a snail template. Before I put the snail on with the template, I'm going to show you how to divide up the piece. This is a great tool to have if you don't have a circle protractor. That way you can make sure that you've got all the lines in the right place. Of course, you can eyeball it and you would divide it as if you were cutting a cake. But some patterns aren't just, divided into 8 or 16. So this comes in really handy. So I'm just lining up the 0 here with the line there. And I'm going to make these peacock feathers 30 degrees apart. So this is 360 degrees. So I'm going to be dividing it into 12 parts. So 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180, 210, 240, 270, 300, 330. And then I'm going to take this, and then also while I have it here, just in the corners, put these lines on here too. So maybe you can see that. Then I want to know where the middle is. So I'm going to do a little circle here. And then I can just line it up like this to divide. If you want the design to be wider, then just instead of doing 12, you could do 8. You get the picture. And then over here, I like to do a little pattern in the corners. And now we're ready to put the design down. Now, you can make a template for the peacock feather, and you can use it that way. You just make one, that's the size that you want, and then you can go around and do it. I'm just going to paint a little bit of that on here freehand so you can get the idea. I'm going to put my snail. So and when you poke the holes, the side that is rough, it should be the right side up. That's what you want, because that means the color is, this carbon is going to go through better. So I'm pounding it and rubbing it. And I lift it up, and that did not go through very well. So I'm going to put this little snail template in the center of my tile. I feel like now, especially more than ever, everything is just sort of slowed down for me, and this kind of reflects the time the snail kind of contemplates what's going on, and feeling a special connection with that right now. Here is my pounce. See how I'm rubbing over the design? There's dust in here. I'm just going to blow that off, lift it up, And there you can see the snail. I'm going to keep it here so I can just use that as a reference. I'm going to take my brush. Actually, you probably don't want this on the wheel when she starts spinning, so I'm going to set it over here so I can see. And then I'm using a dark brown. My colors are on the dry side. And if your colors are dry, you can still absolutely use them. Just add water to it. You can stir it up, or you can mix it on a tile. This is just a glazed tile. You want to make sure that you get enough of the color on here. And then, see, this is on the wet side, so I am going to just dab it on the inside of my glaze. You can also, I've got a Kleenex here, or a paper towel. Paper towel is even better. You can have a paper towel that you can dab the brush on, or if you have a sponge, you can use a sponge. You want to make sure that there's not too much glaze on the brush, because when you go to paint, it's going to go everywhere. All right, so just like I did the pencil lines, I'm going to do my banding lines. So my left hand is spinning counterclockwise. See how I'm able to keep that going quite a bit. If you notice that it's starting to get dry, then you just load up your brush again and continue. I'm going back over here where there wasn't a lot of glaze. Okay, let's get some more color on here again. So this is a special brush. It's an oxhair brush. It's one, I have, a lot of the brushes that I have are really old brushes that I got in Italy. You'll notice, I don't know if you noticed before, that it's cut to a point. So you can try this technique with your brush. I have different ones. You would trim it when it's dry with really good scissors. You want to wash it if it's new and make sure there's no glue in there. You want to get that glue out, and you just kind of slowly trim it around to make a point. This is great for doing like a rim on a piece, thicker lines. This is good for smaller ones. Not all brushes are the same, but you can see that tip right there. That's going to allow you to do thinner lines. If it's not working as well as it should, you can take your needle tool, set it down, kind of like go through it like this to make sure that the bristles are separated, and or wash it really well too. There might be a hair or two that's out of place, so you can pull that out if that's clogging it up. I'm going to paint the snail here. And this is good because the line is on a little bit thicker than I would like. And I can show you then how to clean it up too, how to fix mistakes, because that's one of the things that I really love about Majolica, and I prefer that to painting directly on a piece, because you have a safety net. You can fix it if it doesn't come out the way you want. So here the spiral is kind of sloppy, so I just take my knife and I scrape it. Here it looks like the snail has a bit of a beak, so I'm just going to slowly scrape off that extra glaze right there that I don't need. And if you take off too much, if you scrape it and you hear the sound of the bisque underneath, just add some more glaze. Just add some of the white glaze onto it, let it dry, and keep on going. So I'm going to make sure when you go to paint, always look at the tip just to make sure that there's not a glob that's about to come off. I'm going to do these little spirals on the top. See how I'm not trying to do it all in one go. I'm painting half of the spiral and then the other half. Okay, so there's my snail. Over here, I like to do these little lines inside my banding lines that are quite common. You see this in traditional Majolica work, and a lot of my designs are inspired by Italian Majolica from the late 1100s through the 1500s. So that's how I do well, let me go ahead and finish one round. See, I'm holding my hand with I'm holding my right hand with my left hand. That keeps it steady. My right elbow is resting on the table. That way it's not moving around. Like when you're throwing, if you can brace yourself, you can hold your arms in, you're gonna have a lot more control on what you're doing. Here, I'm going to let me show you how to do the peacock feather. So I'm going to start here in the middle of this. I'm going to do an arch like this, and I'm taking it around. Then, after I go all the way around, I'm going to come back like this and finish it. This design has triangles inside. There are little arches here. And just because you're working on a wheel, turn it so that you've got the best angle. Here in the corners, I like to do this. To the other side. And then like this. Then load it up again to do the lines. Or you could do the lines around it first. So there's the start of the peacock feather. Let me just move on to adding color, how I would add the color. I have a dark blue. The glazes that I'm using to paint with are velvet underglazes, Amico velvet underglazes. They used to have a Majolica glaze, which they discontinued, but the velvets work on top of the LG11. The shiny glaze underneath comes through. You can mix your own glazes. I used to do Gristly Borate with cobalt carbonate for my dark blue, copper carbonate, and mason stains. That also worked, but I prefer these colors, and you can mix them together to make whatever shade you want. There's a huge selection, but I also mix them too. When you're filling in, you want to follow the shape and be consistent on all of them. So now you see the brush is a little bit on the dry side. So I'm going to get it wet, just the tip, roll it around, always load up the brush. Okay, and then like say I want the outline to be dark blue, I'm just pulling that along. You could use a thicker brush if you wanted to. Let's make the snail, the shell, dark blue. This is a round brush. This is a small round brush. It does help to have good brushes. I'm going to do a little bit of shading. So sometimes you can see on my tile, if I'm going to make something a little bit darker, I'll put that light color and then I'll take a little bit of that dark color and just pull it in. And that way you're careful not to make it too dark too soon. That light blue would be nice to also add in here. So this snail design actually is one that's found in the Versailles Chapel in Bologna, Italy, in the San Petronio Church. It was on a hexagon tile, and this peacock feather is something that you see also in the 1500s. So I like to take old designs or patterns that you'd find in the same time period and mix them up and putting them kind of in a new context. I mean, a tile is traditional, but you get the picture. So here's some green. I would take the green and do like the grass. If you notice that it's too thick in an area, then you can darken up the other side. So I'm doing a half circle, so I'm going in one direction, and then I'm going in the other direction. Here I'm going to fill it in like this. I'm going to add a little bit of a lighter green to the grass, just so I have some contrast. There's usually, I'm going to make my snail yellow. I'm going to do the yellow line in here. And then I'm going to paint the peacock feather a nice burnt orange. So there's not really a burnt orange in the velvet underglazes, so I mix my own. I'm using a bright orange and I'm using a bright red. There's some colors that do burn out on the LG11 if you are using the velvets, and that is cinnamon and terracotta. So if you look at the chart, they would be really good, but they just kind of disappear. So this works great though. So when painting an outline, I'm going to follow kind of like that first line that I made. Now I notice some people, they fill it in and then they paint the outline afterwards, just to kind of reduce all the different steps. See how I'm following the shape? I'm keeping it round and making it rounded. That adds a little bit more depth. I do my outlining first, especially if you're using the templates that I showed you before, because if you start filling it in, you're going to cover up all those lines and you're not going to be able to see them. So I paint them on first. And I also, because I can freehand this design and I know how I want it to look, I do that first. So not sure if I explained it, but when you're doing a pattern, you always want to do one stroke first. Your hand becomes accustomed to doing that design. Let's very methodical. You go one direction first, then you go back and you do the other side. On these little peacock feathers, loading up my brush again, rolling it around, not too much glaze, just enough to paint. They almost look like eyelashes. There's a line in the center and it comes out. Anytime you've got a color on top of another one, you want to paint that detail on after you've got the base. So the snail, I paint the snail face, the whole body, the color I want it to be. I'm going to be careful to do just a teeny tiny little dot. There we go. I'm going to give it some stripes too. I'm going to give it some grass. I'm going to do some lines. And also kind of common this time period are these little dots that go like this. 3 dots all around. And then we'll just add a little bit of the orange there. This kind of gives you an idea of what this looks like over there. All right, so that's enough of the snail piece. I'm going to quickly show you how to center a round plate on the banding wheel. I've put this on, I'm spinning it. It's just, when you're going to trim a pot, you need to center it on the wheel first. And that's what we're doing here. I would not recommend using your potter's wheel to do banding lines on your piece because you have to be very careful not to go too fast or your piece can fly off unless you really have it secured on. But even then, I think that it's very tricky. I think it's best to use the banding wheel if possible. If you don't have a banding wheel at home, you could take different size lids and put it on your piece, trace around them so you've got the circles. A Lazy Susan is hard to use because you can't really get your hand underneath it to spin, and you don't really want to do this with your hand on the outside because it's going to be very uneven and you're not going to get a smooth line. So once you've got your plate centered, then you spin it underneath and you can do the lines. I'm just going to go straight to the brush and I'm going to show you one pattern here on the outside, which is the rope design, which is very popular. I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm making the outline for where the rope is going to go. So here it's a little bit on the thick side, so I'm going to take this and scrape it. I could also just make that line a little bit thicker if I wanted to. That would also work. Find the center. Find the middle. Divide and conquer. For our purposes, I'm just going to do a couple of these. I'm going to divide it up by 20. This is a 8-inch plate. All right, when doing the rope design, and the rope design looks like this. I'm going to show you just how to get it started. Always hold your hand. I'm doing circles. I'm doing one half and then the other half. All the way around. Just like with the peacock feather, you want to do one part first. So I start like that. Halfway through, I go down and I take it up to the side. I go down and up. I'm going to do this all the way around. It's kind of thick. So I'm going to turn, always look at the tip of your brush and see what's going on. One part might be a little bit thicker than the other. Okay, so you get the idea. Then here, I'm going to start at the top and go under on the left side. Here we got a little bloop. Here I'm going to start halfway through and go like this, down and there. Here's one that I had done earlier, so you can see it's almost finished. I've got a sunflower that I painted in the middle, and I've added orange in here, and then the different shades of the light blue. Over here, there would be little dots. So again, you've got that going. You would go from here to there. This center, I did the shading in the light blue, and then I painted the brown lines on top, so you avoid having it smudged. If I wanted to do something that's vertical, you could go like this and center it. Using the lever underneath, you can raise it to whatever height you want. So if I'm doing a bowl, I'm going to have it be this high. I would do the lines on the outside to make a rope design like this. Then I would flip it over and work on the inside. Here I'm doing a beehive to start. So this is an old book that's on the chapel in Bologna. And as you can see, there's lots of different images. This is the snail that inspired me to do the tile that you saw earlier. You can see the colors that are in here are the traditional colors that were used at that time. So like a hunter turquoise green, light blues, dark blues, orange, yellow. The brown came from manganese dioxide, so sometimes it can also have a little bit of a purple hue to it. Another favorite book is the Thesaurus from Faenza, and just open up and you can see some other images here. A lot of beautiful work. Here's a sample of peacock feathers from the 1400s. And there's one thing left that I wanted to show you, and that will be it. And that is this device that I have for painting a lot of different pieces at one time. There's little banding wheels on here that you can spin. So you would sit in one spot, and that allows you to do one color at a time and then move that away. Okay. Thanks again for watching this video, and I look forward to answering any questions that you might have. If you have time, feel free to check out my website, SusannaItalianaPottery.com. If you'd like to learn more about this space in Bloomington, Indiana, you can visit thepotteryhousestudio.com. And I wish you all well, and stay healthy and happy potting. And I thank you for your time. Ciao.